Hello, and welcome to Talk Relationship to Me, the show that explores some of the most important relationship topics. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. As a clinical psychologist, I focus on all things relationships. From dating to sex to long-term relationships to divorce, I cover it all. I use my professional lens as a psychologist as well as lived experience to cover these topics. Do you need to talk relationships? You're in the right place. On today's episode, I am covering faking orgasms, how many people do it, why people do it, and why you should never do it again. So, yes, faking orgasms is actually incredibly common. According to some research by Dr. Justin Lehmiller, who has this great podcast called Sex and Psychology that I will link in the show notes, 1 in 4 men have faked orgasms. 50 to 70% of women have said that they've faked orgasms. And 67% of people in general have faked an orgasm. This was research done on college students. I would guess that statistics on people who are out of college, older, in their 30s and 40s and 50s, married in monogamous relationships would have the same numbers approximately or even higher. And so I want to talk today about why people fake orgasms and why it is so detrimental to any type of relationship that you are in, but ultimately to yourself. It is detrimental to yourself. So the context really does matter. People say that they fake orgasms for many reasons, and the top few being to end a sexual encounter. So this is true, again, in the context of a long-term relationship or casual or even a one-night stand. People, it's just not going to happen. And so people just kind of want the sexual encounter to end. So they fake it because, we're taught and we learn that an orgasm ends the sexual encounter, which I have thoughts on that too, but that is another topic. So they just don't often want to have sex in the first place. So this is also relevant to women in long-term monogamous relationships. I talked in another episode about responsive desire. And if women have responsive desire and they are not aroused really at any point during the sexual encounter because there's not foreplay and they're not actually turned on, but they, think that they're being a good partner by having sex anyway, and it's not going to happen, then they often fake it to end it. And men do this too, by the way. Men also fake orgasms, even though we don't think about it as much. Women do it more, at least they report that they do it more, but men also do it. And it's not that hard to do, even though you might think it is, but it's actually not. And so oftentimes people just want to end the sexual encounter for any number of reasons. They didn't want to do it in the first place. They are tired. They're over it. It's just not happening. For whatever reason, they just want it to be done. So they think, okay, orgasm equals done. Another reason that people fake orgasms is that they don't feel comfortable communicating about sex and what feels good in their bodies. And this again is true whether it's a new partner or a long-term partner or, multiple partners. People just don't often have the language to communicate or the comfort when communicating about sex. And if you are communicating to a new partner or a partner that you've had for a long time and you are kind of trying to revamp your sex life because you're listening to this podcast and you've thought, I've faked orgasms for years and I don't want to do it anymore. If that is the case for you, by the way, I suggest coming to individual therapy to talk about how to talk to your partner about it, or couples therapy to broach this together. Because if you are in a long-term relationship and you've been faking orgasms for a long time, it's very hard to come back from this, but it's not impossible. I see lots of couples in this situation, by the way, and the reason why this happens is because they never talked about what they liked in the first place. And again, this comes back to, being squeamish about sex, not being taught how to talk openly about sex and not understanding yourself and what you like and what feels good and being uncomfortable communicating that. Sometimes it feels very sort of clinical and not sexy to talk about something that you like during sex or something that feels good. And so people just sort of avoid it altogether. And people think that sex is supposed to be this thing that, is really intuitive and based on chemistry. And if you were just really into each other, then you're going to have an orgasm. And that could not be further from the truth. If you know your own body and you know what feels good and you know what leads to an orgasm yourself, that is what leads to an orgasm. Of course, chemistry and intimacy and liking someone, of course, are important, but lust or passion does not lead to an orgasm. And so that is really important. It's really understanding and communication. But people don't know how to talk about it. And people who are squeamish about sex in general are often squeamish about other things. So, sometimes they just have a hard time with language around sex, and it is difficult to do that. And if you are somebody if you're new in a relationship, another reason why people fake orgasms is because, around this communication topic, people don't feel comfortable kind of advocating for themselves and communicating. And if you are somebody who is not comfortable communicating to a new partner or somebody who's sort of new-ish in your life or somebody who cares about you because you're worried about disappointing them, you're worried about hurting their feelings, you have likely issues around people pleasing, not wanting to hurt people's feelings. And those are deeper issues that can manifest in this way where ultimately your sex life suffers, your life in general probably suffers. If you're not advocating for yourself, you can advocate for yourself in a kind, loving way that is not mean or judgmental. But if you are somebody who has a hard time, even in the initial stage of the relationship, talking about what you like around sex or anything for that matter, then you might have deeper people-pleasing issues, and that is just something to think about. You should always be authentic when you are starting out relationships. So, I'm talking here about faking orgasms, but this goes for anything. This goes for, if somebody you're newly dating suggests going to get Indian food and you don't like Indian food, but you say yes, then they're going to think that you like Indian food, because why wouldn't they, right? Or if you laugh at their jokes that aren't funny, they're going to think that you think they're funny, but you're just trying to be polite. So, you should never fake orgasms or fake that you're into a kind of cuisine or fake that you find someone funny, because you are not being your authentic self in that relationship. And ultimately, you are the one that is going to suffer for that. And then also, this really affects trust in a relationship. If you fake orgasms for years and then, all of a sudden, you sort of decide that you don't want to do that anymore, and you are, let's say, again, in couples therapy, and this comes to light because you are trying to work on your relationship and your connection, and you should be working on sex in couples therapy. By the way, that's really important. If you are seeing a couples therapist who does not talk about sex, then you're going to not make a lot of progress. But let's say you've decided, hey, I haven't been honest about this, and, I've been faking it basically our whole relationship, then this is, of course, going to affect the trust in your relationship. And, it's not too late to come back from that. You can have a kind of conversation of, all the factors that went into this and how to turn this around. But it is hard to change the patterns once you are in it. So my best advice to people in the beginning of relationships is never to fake it. And if it's just not going to happen, then it's just not going to happen. That's fine. It doesn't have to happen every time. Although I will say that, it's sort of popular to say that an orgasm is not the be all end all. And that is true. There are many things, great, feel good things about sex. Sex is a huge umbrella. It doesn't have to only be about the orgasm. It can't only be about the orgasm. Then it's too much pressure on that. However, orgasms are physiologically pleasurable and release a lot of dopamine and connecting hormones and oxytocin and all these things that make you feel closer to people that you have orgasms with and just make you feel good in general, that they are an important part of a sexual relationship. And so if you are never having an orgasm when you have sex with your partner, this is a big problem. And especially in the context of responsive desire, if you are a woman trying to get in the mood and you do, but you never have an orgasm, then of course you're not going to be motivated to do it again later on when you are not in the mood. It would be like spending time cooking a meal that does not taste good, right? You have to look forward to eating the meal. You have to know it's going to be delicious. And so that's a really important piece about responsive desire that I talked about in another episode. But if you are with someone and you've been faking orgasms for a long time, it is not too late. And you can approach this with kindness and tenderness and, really genuine talking about how important it is and how you want to address this part of your relationship. And if you have a partner that can be understanding about that, then that is great. If not, obviously, there are bigger issues here. And if you again, are dating someone early on and you are hesitant to tell them what feels good, or you're hesitant to tell them that it's not going to happen because you're afraid that they're going to kind of be butthurt or get whiny about it or get defensive or shut down, then this is a major red flag for somebody who has a hard time communicating and hearing what would feel good for you. And if they are defensive and take it personally, then this is a red flag for a lot of other things. And, that is just something to think about. You should not be afraid of your partner's response to you telling them what feels good for you, or you're saying, hey, this isn't quite working for me. Let's try something else. Or, hey, it's just not going to happen tonight. Hopefully tomorrow, no big deal, right? Again, if you have a sexual encounter without an orgasm, every now and then it is no big deal. There's lots of other ways to feel good and feel connected. And so this, again, is a really important component of a relationship. If sex is important to one or both partners in the situation, or multiple partners, whatever your relationship configuration is, then it has to be important for the relationship in general. And if this is something that you don't address, you are not going to like sex. If you've been in the dynamic where you fake orgasms, and you have for a long time, you are not going to like sex. You are going to be incredibly resentful of your partner, but they're not going to know. And that is another huge reason never to do it, because then your partner is just going to think that what they're doing is working. Like my Indian food example, they're going to think you like something that you don't like. So why would they not do that, right? And then if it's uncomfortable or it just was really not doing it for you, you're kind of stuck in this pattern, and it's inauthentic and it breeds resentment and anger, and you are definitely not going to want to do it. And the last reason why people fake orgasms is also, they don't want to kind of say that they're not really into it, period. They don't have a sex drive. They are not really into their partner. They're not attracted to them. They're just kind of maybe more on the avoidant side anyway, where, they're just not communicating authentically about what is actually going on. And they just don't really want to say, I'm just like not really into sex anymore. I'm just not really into this. It's not going to happen. And so it's just easier to do it and to fake it, because in the moment it's just easier than kind of dealing with a bigger situation. But if you are listening to this and any of this applies to you, again, it is not too late. You can come back from this, but it's got to be done with care and caution and sensitivity and authenticity and warmth and love. And also, if you are listening to this and you're like, I've faked it for years, I have no interest in my partner, I'm not attracted to them, I'm not interested in addressing this, then therapy could still be helpful for you to figure out what to do in this situation, right? How to look at your relationship differently or think about alternatives. But if this is hitting home for you, then it's just something important to think about. And again, if you are dating and you are having new sexual partners, just from the beginning, make it a point to never fake it and to just be honest about what you like, or again, be honest that it's not going to happen. And again, this is also a good test for communication in a relationship and disappointing someone, because everybody likes to make their partner feel good. So it's okay that it is disappointing to the partner, but it is not okay, if they act, very immaturely or aggressively or defensively about it. It's okay that they're disappointed that they're not getting you off. That's okay. You can work with that, right? Because everybody wants their partner to feel good. So the feeling is okay, but it all depends on how they act. And if they handle it in a mature way where they can ask you what you're into and they can talk about it, and you could talk about sex, maybe not in that moment of vulnerability when it's not happening, but at a different time. You sort of have to talk about it in a bit of a kind of a clinical way, what feels good, what you like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I always encourage people to have these conversations kind of outside of the moment where you are naked in bed and your partner just didn't get you off. This can be a more vulnerable time. So talk about it at dinner, talk about it at coffee, on a walk, whatever it is. Come to a professional and discuss it with a professional that you feel comfortable with. There are all kinds of things to do to address this, to feel closer. And if you are also listening to this and you're thinking, I don't actually know how to orgasm, I don't know really what feels good, I don't have a lot of experience, then you can also do that if you want to. You can learn about your body, you can learn about what feels good, you can learn about sensations that do it for you and don't do it for you. You can read things that turn you on. You could do all kinds of things to figure out your own body. And you can do those things with partners too. There's lots of exploration to be had. But my main point here is don't ever fake it. Don't fake an orgasm. Don't fake anything in a relationship, for fear of disappointing a partner. And if you are in that situation, then I encourage you to think about that partnership and to come and talk to somebody about it, because there are probably other areas where you are not being your full authentic self. And when that happens, you are just not living your best life. So if you have anything else to say on faking orgasms or any thoughts, please do let me know. This has been Talk Relationship to Me. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. Do you have a question about relationships? I would love to hear from you. Go to my website, drelanahoffman.com, and click contact, or find me on Instagram at dr.elanahoffman. You can find all the info you need, including more about today's episode, with links in the show description. And if you have questions or comments about today's episode, I would love to hear from you. You could inspire a podcast topic. Until next time, I leave you with just that, don't fake it. And make that a 2026 resolution to never fake an orgasm again.